last 2 years were years of disruption across the globe. And I think everyone, whether it was industry or a common man, everyone was impacted because of this pandemic. And still we do not see the certainty when it will really come to an end. So therefore, I think people are eagerly awaiting for 2022 budget, and they have a lot of hopes from the government. I think on taxation front, if I'll start within a common man, I think the first and foremost thing would be to have a standard deduction, because the standard deduction was increased to 40,000 way back in 2018, and then it was increased to 50,000 in 2020. And again that they removed transportation allowance and the medical expenses. But now, because of this pandemic, there are no deductions which are available for employed people. I think standard deduction is the only relief what they get. It's an idle time, and I think it's in a right demand by the people to at least increase the standard deduction from 50,000 to at least 1 lakh. Secondly, on investment front, if you look at it, maybe ATC we have been seeing for many years that the limit is 1,50,000, and I think it should be increased to at least 3 lakhs, or if not possible then 2.5 lakh, so that people can really get some incentive by reducing their tax liability and by generating the funds for their future by making investments in ATC. Because ATC also has many kinds of investments and so many sections are also merged. So therefore a limit of 1.5 lakhs is very small amount, and we have not seen any increase in last so many years. On ATD front, which is very important, that when you get a medical, you get 50,000 rupees on the insurance premium, and 25,000 on insurance premium and 50,000 on senior citizens medical expenses. I think over and above, the COVID expenses should also be covered, and a deduction under ATD for COVID expenses over and above of existing limit should also be introduced. On slab front, I think there is a very good, I think there is a right demand, and if you will look at it, I think there is a possibility for government to tinker, because on the industry side they have reduced the tax rate substantially to 15% and 22%, but on individuals we see that certainly they can increase the limit of 10 lakhs to 20 lakhs when the highest slab of 30% with surcharge is applicable, number one. And if possible, why not to increase the highest surcharge in the case of individual from 30% to 25%. So, and we have not seen much changes as far as the slabs are concerned, substantial changes. And I think this is the right time for government to do some tinkering on slab side. Especially for high income group, the tax rate is as high as 42%, nearly 42.447 with surcharge. I think there is also a scope to reduce, and there was a hue and cry, and people start moving out of India, those who were high income people, to have their residence status elsewhere. So I think there is a good opportunity for government to think through at this point of time, when I think the tax rate of 42% for high income group, anyone who's drawing more than 5 crore, I think is a huge. So there is a good possibility that maybe government could think on those lines. In terms of industry, if you look at it, I think one of the important things from industry perspective is that I think for reinstating the weighted deduction of 200% in the case of in-house R&D, I think they should reintroduce that. Secondly, we see that especially on Section 80 JJA, where the qualifying remuneration of 25,000 rupees per month, I think it should be increased to 1 lakh. And government, we also read the news that government is also expecting that they may introduce something in terms of reconfirming or validating the claim by obtaining the data either from PF authorities or from EPI or from EPI or EPF. So I think if there would be a validation possible by introducing any such scheme or such system, I think this amount should certainly be increased from 25,000 to 1 lakh. The COVID expenses, industries incurring huge for the welfare of their employees and even otherwise, I think that deduction under 37 should be allowed. On CRSS, there has been always a demand to allow the expenses which they keep separate fund on account of CRS. I think that is where government should allow, and people are using this during this COVID time, not only for their own employees which they cannot spend on that, but even on general public. I think if it is coming out of the business, and if it is the requirement of the company law to keep certain funds separately, I think there is a great opportunity for people to spend money and then accordingly get the deduction again under section 37. Even on the depreciation front, I think 100% depreciation on machines which are used in manufacturing, PPE kits, masks, ventilators and all. I think 100% depreciation on those machines should be allowed. I think broadly, if you look at it, these are some of the things even for industry. In especially for startups, I think government is pursuing that initiative, and PM is very aggressively supporting the startups. And I think there are so many issues which has already been highlighted by the startup bodies, and I think that should also be considered. And especially from ESOP's perspective, now we see that they have already extended the deferral of taxation of ESOPs perquisites in the case of only eligible startups. But the startups which are incorporated between 1st April 2016 till 31st of March 2021, they are not considered as eligible even though they are registered with DIPP. I think where government should extend it even to all the startups which are registered with DIPP, because now I think overall figures are running into thousands, and eligible startups as per this section which falls under ATIAC, I think it is few hundreds who can avail this. So I think they should also think in terms of extending the same. On miscellaneous front, if you look at it, I think while you make the payment for advanced tax, especially the foreign tax credit, what you have paid as an individual or as in a corporate, there is no allowability of, or there is no provision which allows you to take the benefit while computing the advanced tax. The FTC, the foreign tax credit or foreign taxes which you have paid overseas. So FTC should be allowed while computing the advanced tax. I think the tax effects on appeal orders where the huge refunds are there should be some timeline which should be fixed under the law, because usually we see the people are really facing the heat of not getting their refunds, and I think that is where the government should think through. Some guidelines are required to be issued in terms of reducing the litigation. VSV was introduced, very good initiative, so that let the litigation be under the control. But right now, the way the faceless assessment, some of the orders which are received, or even otherwise, since there is no accountability, additions are made for sake of making additions, or at times when you have filed the return to ask for a huge refund, they convert the refunds into a demand by making additions, and then people win after a couple of years at ITAT level, and then get their money back with huge interest on top of that which government has to pay. So some kind of mechanism, some kind of guideline should be provided. That is very important, so that the assessment should be done with keeping in mind not to raise some issues and create litigations which are not very relevant, and where we were at this litigation stage, even at second stage at ITAT, most of the companies when they win, and now we find some of the orders even are very critical, where the courts have said that orders are passed without application of mind, without giving any appropriate reasons. So I think guidelines are required to be given. And lastly, on the disputed demands, we see that at first appeal level you have to pay 20%, very welcome step. But at this point of time, when there is a COVID time, there is a fund, there is a working capital issues are there, maybe this limit of 20% should be reduced to 10% for the industry. And I think this is something which would be appreciated. And lastly, on equalization levy, I think a lot of representations have gone, but it is important to introduce the enabling provisions to claim the refund of the equalization levy and appeals, etc. And there are certain if you look at the provisions, there are a lot of clarifications which have, I think the representations have already been made, like e-commerce operators who are liable for equalization levy on supply and services only when the payments are routed through them. Even they are not routed, the way the section is framed, it appears to be still they would be liable to pay the equalization levy. And there are many other points, as I said, the representations have already been made by the chambers, and government should think through on those lines. So I think with these few comments, and there are many, but some of the measures which I just highlighted, two important principles which they need to keep it in mind: simplicity of compliances, they should try to bring it, make appropriate amendments to make the compliance as simple as possible, and stability in the tax policies in order to attract the foreign investments.